Good evening, viewers. Thank you for joining us on this lovely Wednesday night. Tonight, we have an article that examines the use of the Bible, particularly the book of Revelation, throughout American history in characterizing certain immigrant groups by demonizing them with Revelation-like rhetoric. However, is this still occurring? And if so, is it being done on purpose, or is it just a case that immigrant groups usually just happen to be demonized similarly, regardless of the time period or the circumstances they fall into? That is, are they blamed for a given society's problems and used to prey upon a given society's greatest fears? The Bible has not, or is not, only used to vilify immigrants, by the way, but it has been the justification for slavery, the subjugation of women, the slaughter of ethnic groups. It is a convenient instruction manual for any group in power to oppress smaller groups, the ones not in power, and those who also perceivedly pose a threat to the group that is in power. This story is from RNS by Yi John Lin on October 24th, 2024. All right, so we are looking at an article right now that characterizes Americans throughout history as people who use the Bible to vilify immigrants. Obviously, immigration is an issue, a hot button issue in this country. So, Kelly, what's the significance of the author's message in this article?
I think his name speaks volumes in that respect, right? Yi John Lin. It seems like he's a Christian and he's trying to get fellow Christians to re-examine the rhetoric that they use, as far as I can see. I mean, it's funny because he's really talking to non-white or to white Western Christians who don't get the message that they themselves have been trying to spread around the world. It's kind of funny in that respect to me, but I think that's it. I mean, Jesus said to welcome the foreigners into your lands, and that's exactly what Christian nationalists aren't doing. You know, they're using religion by cherry picking Bible passages to push bigoted ideas. So, is it a refutation of the lessons in the Bible altogether that we're getting here? That's what I'm seeing. You know, it's like he's saying, hey, look, Christians, you need to start being better Christians. Or stop calling yourself a Christian.
Yeah, you know, I got that from the article. I also thought, you know, this is kind of this article is a little bit misrepresented. It misrepresents American history somewhat, because I think especially, you know, as you go through American history, you can survey that not all Americans are using the Bible to uphold these kind of values. I think that the Bible is used by people who benefit from vilifying certain people, right? We saw this with the slave Bible. We saw this throughout slavery. We see this in a lot of different areas, like I mentioned in the intro. But what the author also talks about is the use of imagery, the kind of fire and brimstone stuff from Revelation that really strikes fear into people. And I wanted to talk to Eli about that. Eli, what is the significance of religious imagery in promoting the policies in the United States, or any policy in general?
Well, I touched on this on Monday night. The politicians have learned that they don't have to believe what they're saying; they just have to get the right imagery, like we're talking about, or say the right things. So, and what it basically is if they can terrify their voters enough into thinking that, like, you know, hell awaits if you don't, you know, stop this terrible thing that's clearly the devil causing this, and this is against what God wants. You know, if you don't vote against this, you're compliant or complicit, and that it's psychological torture essentially to get them to voting into their policies. Like I gave the example on the last episode about like immigration. If they just decide, okay, well, here's the reason I really want more strict immigration, but that's not going to get the voters. What'll get the voters is if I say this thing about immigrants, and there are enough people who agree with that it'll get me those votes, and that's essentially all it is.
Yeah, the kind of hot button topic, right? The buzzwords that really get people, and the images that are associated with those things. It's almost like a marketing tool, using the Bible to vilify the people that you can, in order to, I guess, gain support, preying on the fears of Americans by vilifying a certain group and using imagery to do that. The thing that I think is funny about this that we really need to apply, and this comes with an education on the Bible, is that Revelation was written as kind of a cryptic text. It was written about the Romans, right? And you couldn't be Hebrew and say things about the Romans without being punished, as we see in the case of Jesus, right? So this was essentially written by a smaller group about an invading force, right? About the Romans, about people from foreign lands coming into their country. And now we see it being used again that way, right? And we've seen it used multiple times throughout our history and throughout other histories. And Aaron, I want to talk to you about that. How does the book of Revelation, or maybe even the Bible in general, relate to the human psyche and the kind of different circumstances we may find ourselves in?
Well, the whole point of Revelation, like you said, is that Jesus wins. And if you're not with Jesus, you lose, right? Mm-hmm. The Revelations, there's some really poignant verses in the book of Revelation about the people that make it to the end, that make it into heaven. Their robes will be made white, and God will literally wipe all your tears from your eyes. Very poignant verses, right? Who doesn't want to be part of the group where God is wiping the tears from your eyes? So the book of Revelation is definitely an us versus them narrative. And it really encourages you to be part of the us, because if you're not part of the us, holy cow, do you have some shit that you're going to have to deal with, right? Plagues and death and famine and pestilence and all those awful, horrible things. That's one of the points
and then an eternity in hell after that.
Hell and fire and brimstone. I mean, that's one of the points of this article, is that when Revelation talks about the other, they don't just say, oh, and then there's some other people that they just went their own way. No, they call these other people filthy, dogs, sorcerers, murderers, idolaters, awful, horrible words to describe this other group that isn't part of the in group, that isn't part of the in crowd. And this isn't, the Bible didn't come first and engender this bigotry. It's the bigotry in all human beings that the Bible is then preying upon, right? If we were to wave our magic atheist wand and get rid of all religions, guess what? We would still have all the problems we have today, because religion isn't the problem. Religion feeds on the problems that we have just being human beings. We are bigoted, and it's really easy to get us worked up and othering and tribal against other groups. It's really easy to get that fear response going, especially in uncertain times where people can't make ends meet. They can't find a job, even though people are saying, "Oh, it's easy to find a job." Well, how come I can't find a job, right? And so it's really, when you're fearful and you're scared, it's really easy for people in power to take advantage of that fear. So not giving into that is a skill that you have to learn to turn off.
And that's what I'm talking about. This kind of cookie cutter type pattern when we see this kind of rhetoric surface. Okay. Now I'm going to walk kind of a fine line here, because I don't want to be perceived as, kind of overtly bashing political candidates or leaders to be. But I do want to harken back to what our vice president-elect said about his future boss, and that he called Donald Trump the Adolf Hitler of our time. And he's not alone in that, right? A lot of the language that Donald Trump has used,
Very similar.
talking about immigrants poisoning the blood of our country, right? And really minimizing them down to the vermin level, if you will, reflects a lot. I don't know if anybody has read Mein Kampf or even just skimmed through it, but Hitler's book, really has a lot of comparisons about the Jews. And I want to say that there were uncertain times there as well. The economy was not good. People needed somebody to blame. And so they kind of attacked these people using religion. If you consider the religious difference between the larger population of Germany and the Jewish people, right? Religion is also at play in the United States. And I don't think it's all Americans doing it. Again, I think that there are certain people that are afraid of immigrants and the people that need their support are playing on their fears by using religion. And so on that note, Kelly, I want to come back to you and just talk to you about that a little bit. Is it fair for this author to characterize Americans as people who use the Bible against others? Or is it a larger problem? Isn't this a worldwide issue that we see more and more?
Yeah, I mean, it is a worldwide issue, and we see it a lot. Though, here's the crazy thing, though. We don't see it in other first world countries. We only see that here in America, right? Mm-hmm. When we see that in third world countries and South America and in Africa. We see that militant Christianity that's going to cleanse all the evil from the world, right? So, I mean, and that I think is bothersome. Why is it that we here in America, who could be that shining city on the hill, are the ones who are spreading so much hatred? I don't get it. And especially when you talk to most Christians and they tell you that Jesus's message was a message of love and understanding, and yet they don't practice that, right? It's just do as I say, but not as I do. And it's pretty bad. And it's nothing new. It's been going on for decades in this country. When the Irish were coming over here, they were portrayed in political cartoons as monkeys. Now, personally, I don't mind living up to being a monkey. That'd be like a step up for me. But I don't think most people of Irish descent would agree with that. And it goes to show you, though, how U.S. definitions of what is acceptable has changed, right? You couldn't make fun of Irish people back then, but you can now have like the Notre Dame fighting Irish guy, which is still making fun of Irish people, but it's acceptable now. So it's kind of weird, right?
Yeah, I do. And you bring up an interesting point. Are Americans desensitized to hate over time? And do we just accept it as normal? Eli, how long do we have to put up with this? I mean, should we accept it as normal, or what's the alternative here? What do we do to denormalize the hatred?
I think kind of between like the three of you guys have kind of touched on something that gives me the answer. I think it probably is just a sort of a thing that will naturally happen. I like to say a lot that the two things that humans are best at are pattern recognition and tribalism. Mm-hmm. And that's basically like those two things go hand in hand when it comes to like who is in my in-group, right? There is this common characteristic between all of these people. We're all born here in America, or, what we now call America.
Yeah, right.
We're all born here. And, some people take that further. They're born here and they look a certain way. And they're born here and they look a certain way and they believe this, and they only sleep with these people. And the different people have a different radius as to how big that circle goes. But that tribalism and that pattern recognition is just that's just a part of who we are, as like it's a part of our identity as an animal on this rock. So I think, honestly, it may just be a thing that just continues.
That was actually excellent. I really like that idea of tribalism. When I consider the political spectrum from conservative on the right to liberal on the left, and then fascism on the far right, and socialism on the way, or communism really on the way far left, the tribalism, those people with the smaller radius tends to fall toward the fascist point, right? And the people with the larger radius, those are a little bit more left-leaning, right? They will accept more people into their tribe, whereas the tribalism on the fascist side of things really want to keep their tribe small. They want to eliminate competition from other tribes, and that's where you kind of get the scale between fascism to communism. And so I thought that was spot on. I think this kind of rhetoric comes from the tribal folks who are often associated with being conservative, who are often demonized as fascists, although I have heard leftists be called fascists, and that actually doesn't work. That doesn't fit. But that's a topic for another show. But you also bring up pattern recognition, and I think somebody who wanted to talk about humans being pattern matching machines is Aaron. Coming into the show, you talked a little bit about that, and I just wanted to see if you wanted to expand on that.
Yeah. So yeah, as Eli said, our brains are literally wired to be pattern matching machines. If anybody's near a light socket right now, go ahead and look at it, or an electrical outlet. Go ahead and look at it. What do you see? A face, right? You see two eyes and a mouth. But it's not a face. It's an electrical socket. Why do you see a face? Because your brain is pattern matching, right? And it goes to such an extreme that when some people toast their toast, they can see Jesus. And a few months ago, somebody posted pictures of themselves shirtless online, and you can see Jesus in this person's abs. I kid you not. If you search for Jesus abs, there's a guy out there. You can see Jesus in his abs. It's the craziest thing you've ever seen. This is such a common thing. There's actually a name for it. It's called apophenia, the tendency to see meaningful connections between unrelated things, or this pattern matching ability. And this is why books like the Bible can be a little bit dangerous, because the Bible, when you speak in generalities like the Bible, there's no really specifics in their prophecies or in their here to's and what fors and here's what's going to happen. Because they speak in such generalities, the human brain says, oh, well, I can map all these real world events onto these general things in the Bible, and that makes the Bible true. And that's really dangerous. And that's even more specific version of apophenia. It's called pareidolia, the tendency to impose meaning on things we perceive that don't actually have any meaning. Actual examples can include Rorschach blot tests, seeing the man in the moon, the face on Mars, and things like that. And so if we understand that's how our brain works, we can kind of take a step back and think, am I really seeing a pattern here? Is this prophecy really true, or is my brain imposing some kind of pattern on it? Because our brain literally likes to make shit up. Our brain has to know things, and it will literally make shit up so that it has a cohesive story and a cohesive worldview on things. So you have to be really, really careful.
Yeah, I always thought my brain was the most important part of my body, and one day I realized what's telling me that.
Exactly.
Well, Kelly, you've got a fine brain. You often joke about being a monkey. Well, you said tonight being a monkey would be a step up, and you often joke about having two brain cells that stick together. But, I want to pick your brain cells and ask you.
Never say pick up your brain to a geologist.
Why is that?
Because a rock picks.
A rock picks? Was that?
A rock pick.
Oh, got it. Okay, I thought you were telling me a really bad dad joke for a second.
Well, it was.
It was a death threat. Kelly, you think that this kind of thing will eventually play out, but what's the risk of not vehemently pushing back against this kind of thing? And should we be doing that? And where do we stand right now as a nation, as a country that has a history of weaponized marketing toward groups, like immigrants?
Well, I've got a lot of fears about where we're at right now. My son often says we are just one major economic crisis away from fascism.
Yeah.
And I think we've been in a cold civil war for years now because of it. And when I see like promises of 20% tariffs being put on everything we buy at Walmart, think about that.
Yeah.
And that's going to be pushing us towards that major economic crisis. So I'm really worried about what could happen in the future. And I'm worried about people who don't fit the Christian nationalist demographic and what's going to happen to them. It's like, I don't think they're making an America for everybody. They're trying to make an America for them. And that scares me.
Yeah. I think the fear is that maybe some people in power or people who are coming into power might willingly drive the United States into a state of chaos in order.
I didn't want to be conspiratorial, but I mean, it's definitely a possibility.
Well, let's look at, we're not being conspiratorial, but this is an article that we're covering tonight that talks about kind of the patterns, right, of how religion can be used or how politics can be used to be divisive. And we covered what World War II was like in Germany and how that kind of sparked the fascism that it sparked fascism. I'm not going to take the leap and say the kind of fascism that we're afraid of, but it certainly did. And yeah, so in those fears that many people have, I think rests the possibility that some people might be ready to go down that road. And that's what strikes me.
But
yeah,
just a point I wanted to make real quick is that if Jesus were born today and he said the same parable today, it would probably be the good Mexican, because that's the way Samaritans were looked upon in his day, which is why he chose the Samaritan, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, just to bring that to our modern times, that would be that parable today, the good Mexican, the guy from outside the country who came to my aid when nobody else would.
Yeah. So, man, there's so many ways to take this. I think in short, this really comes down to, since we're going to talk about politics and religion, and we harkened on that a little, or we harped on that a little bit on Monday night's show when we talked about education and politics. With a better education, people can get a better understanding of what it is they actually believe and ascribe to, right? Jesus said, accept, love your neighbor and welcome immigrants and, be kind to everybody. But that's not what we see. And that's because there's no education really in working against these kind of tribalist views and having people open up their patterns or break their patterns. Lightning round, gentlemen. Eli, we're going to finish off starting with you. So we'll go Eli, Aaron, Kelly. Eli, what do you have with us to close out on?
I did have another thought too. Like you mentioned, like, is it all Americans that's doing this, or is it just like some of them are? And I think that's probably a lot more accurate. There is a group that are, but like there's groups of Americans that describe people based on like their Hogwarts house at the same time. So I think like we should also like, is it necessarily endemic that is happening in the US? It was just a thought that I had, an interesting comparison. The fact that you can describe someone that way doesn't mean anything about like the reality of who they are, which is the point that gets missed most of the time. Yeah.
And Aaron, your comment about seeing Jesus in someone's abs, there's probably a whole lot of clergy members that are living in the closet surfing the web right now trying to find that photo. So good on you. But what do you got for us to wrap things up?
Be really skeptical of people that use fear to motivate you. They use fear to get power because they're trying to tie into our tribalism as a human species. They're trying to get into that deep reptilian animal instinct part of us. We have to fight against it. Like I said earlier, it's a skill we have to learn to not let fear drive us and make us choose, because from everything that I know and understand, immigrants are not the problem. Immigrants are not taking our jobs. Immigrants are not more violent than other people. As 50, 100 years ago, we didn't have an immigration policy. If you wanted to live in the United States, you got on a boat, you sailed across the ocean, you got off, and guess what? You lived in America. This idea of closed borders is a new invention for our country. So immigration is not the problem. So what's the problem? Maybe think about that for a while.
Excellent. And finally, our resident geologist, Kelly.
You said we got to educate people. And I mentioned on Monday night, I mentioned the Carlin effect. Common sense isn't that smart, and half the people are dumber than that. So how do you educate the people that you literally cannot educate? And Aaron touched on it, animal instincts. I think maybe the left needs to get better at appealing to animal instincts. And there are other instincts besides fear. Like a dog really loves having its tummy rubbed, right? So maybe we need to start thinking about how we can rub society's tummy and get a lot of those people on our side.
Maybe a tummy that's got Jesus in it. Yeah, a nice rock hard set of abs. Yeah. Interesting conversation. Of course, we never have enough time. I could probably talk about this for hours. using the Bible to market fear, market hatred, not a new concept. Maybe immigration's a new concept, or closed borders are a new concept. Maybe the idea of the United States dipping into or slipping into fascism might be a new concept. But if the road that we take to get there is the weaponization of the Bible and the vilification of minority groups by using religion and preying on each other's fears, it's the same old stuff. And that's the pattern that we're falling into. And it's the tribalism that is so dangerous for our country. So we really do need to separate religion and government. And we talk about that here a lot on the nonprofit. So if you want to see more of that, folks, click one of the links below.